It was New Year's Eve in a small village called Wintersfield. The snow had fallen heavily, covering the streets in a thick blanket of white. The villagers were preparing for their New Year celebrations, but there was one place they avoided: the old abandoned bell tower at the edge of town. "Stay away from the bell tower tonight," the villagers would warn. "It's cursed. The bell rings on its own, and whoever hears it is doomed." But Emily, a brave young woman, didn't believe in such superstitions. She had grown up in Wintersfield, and every year she would ignore the rumors and enjoy the celebration. This year, however, something felt different. As the clock struck 11 p.m., Emily stood by the window in her house. She watched the swirling snowflakes outside, and her gaze lingered on the bell tower, which stood tall and dark against the night sky. The villagers had always spoken about it, how the bell rang at midnight, but no one ever saw who pulled the rope. "I'm going to check it out," Emily said to her friends, who were gathered by the fireplace, talking excitedly about the coming year. "Don't be silly," Sarah, her best friend, exclaimed. "You've heard the stories. The bell rings every year and nobody ever comes back the same." Emily smiled. "It's just a bell, Sarah. There's nothing to be afraid of." Despite her friends' warnings, Emily left the warmth of her house and stepped into the cold night. The wind bit at her cheeks as she made her way to the bell tower. As she walked, the village grew quieter, and the snow seemed to fall heavier. The usual sounds of laughter and celebration were swallowed by the deep silence. Her footsteps crunched in the snow, and she couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching her. The bell tower loomed ahead, its silhouette dark and foreboding against the moonlit sky. Emily reached the bell tower, and the door creaked open as if inviting her inside. The air was colder here, and the old stone walls seemed to breathe with the wind. Emily stepped in cautiously, the sound of her boots echoing in the empty tower. The only light came from a single flickering lantern hanging on the wall. She glanced up at the bell that hung above her. It was massive, old, and covered in rust, but it didn't look like it had ever been touched. Then, without warning, the bell rang. The deep, resonating sound of the bell echoed through the tower, vibrating the very air around her. Emily froze, her heart racing. She hadn't touched the bell, but it was ringing. In a panic, she turned to leave, but the door slammed shut with a loud bang. The walls of the tower seemed to close in on her, and the temperature dropped even lower. Her breath came out in icy puffs, and the darkness seemed to grow heavier. Suddenly, a voice whispered from the shadows. "You shouldn't have come," the voice said, faint but chilling. It came from a dark corner of the room where a shadowy figure began to form. The figure was tall, its face hidden in the darkness, but Emily could feel its presence. She stepped back, her hand on the cold door handle, but it wouldn't budge. The figure stepped closer, and with every movement, the temperature dropped further. Emily felt her skin crawl, her breath shallow. "Who are you?" Emily gasped. "I was once like you," the figure whispered, its voice like a cold wind. "I came here on New Year's Eve to hear the bell, but now I am bound to it, doomed to ring it for eternity." Emily's heart raced. "What do you want from me?" "You came at the wrong time," the figure said, its voice growing louder. "At midnight, the bell tolls for those who dare to listen. The curse is passed on to those who hear it. You will stay here with me, forever." In an instant, the bell rang again, its deafening sound shaking the tower. Emily screamed, but the figure's hands were already upon her, cold and unforgiving. She tried to pull away, but it was no use. The curse had claimed her. The next morning, the villagers found the bell tower silent. Emily had vanished, her footsteps leading to the door, but there was no sign of her inside. The snow had covered any trace of her presence. Every New Year's Eve, the bell tolls again, and some say that if you listen closely, you can hear the whispers of Emily, trapped forever in the bell tower.